Hey guys, tonight we're headed somewhere narrow and dim, so narrow, in fact, that you have to turn sideways to squeeze between two leaning wooden walls. You brush past drying laundry, barely visible in the torchlight. The ground beneath your feet is hard-packed dirt. Every step sounds louder than it should, and even the cats here tread softly. You're walking through a medieval Jewish ghetto, and let's just say, you probably won't survive this, not comfortably, anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's oddly soothing to know we're all restless together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You live in a walled section of town, squeezed into a grid barely wide enough for carts. That's by design. Christian city laws don't allow Jews to live just anywhere, and so your neighborhood, called a Judengasse in the Germanic lands or a call in Catalonia, is crammed tight, usually near the city wall, convenient for expelling you quickly if needed. By day, it bustles with trade, smells of spice, sweat, and burning tallow. But by night? The mood changes, shutters slam early. Curfews click into place like clockwork. Town criers bellow across the square, and sometimes even a horn sounds, signaling that it's time for all Jews to be indoors. It's less bedtime, more containment. Some cities lock the gates. Others don't bother, the watchmen know where you belong. You sit on a three-legged stool in a one-room home shared with your parents, your siblings, a cousin who never left, and the neighbor's daughter who was taken in after her father vanished. There's no privacy, just layered whispers in the dark. Your bed is a straw mattress tucked in a loft space above the main room, low enough that you hit your head if you sit up too fast. You'd laugh, if laughter didn't echo. The walls are thin. You can hear your neighbor crying. You can also hear someone outside. Just a drunk. Maybe. Or a thief. Or someone looking for trouble. You clutch a prayer scroll for comfort, not because it protects you, but because it reminds you who you are. That's not always a comfort. Historians still argue whether these early ghettos were originally formed for protection or control. Jewish communities often requested to live near one another for safety and solidarity, especially after a few pogroms too many. But the laws that eventually surrounded them, geographically and socially, turned these close-knit zones into fishbowls. You're not just watched. You're counted. Taxed differently. Marked, even in the streets. Some cities require Jews to wear identifying symbols, yellow badges, pointed hats, or special cloaks. The sumptuary laws vary wildly, some inspired by the church, others by civic leaders who want to make sure you look different enough to blame quickly. You pass a mirror, or the closest thing to one, a polished metal disc, and catch your own eye. You adjust your cap. You don't want trouble. You never do. It's a strange paradox. You live among hundreds of fellow Jews, yet the walls never let you forget you're surrounded by people who believe your very presence is suspicious. Not always hateful, just always uneasy. You sell cloth, lend money, repair watches, teach Hebrew, and still the whisper follows. They're different. You try to sleep. Someone coughs below. Someone else whispers a blessing. A cart rumbles by too late for comfort. Your stomach clenches. You've heard rumors, someone's child got sick. There's been talk in the market. You close your eyes harder. One mainstream fact here: in many medieval cities, Jewish quarters were required to be closed off by gates at night, often under threat of punishment to both Jew and Christian if the curfew was broken. And here's a fringe tidbit: in some communities, the shofar, a ram's horn usually reserved for holidays, was used as a nightly signal for Jews to return to their quarters. The sound, meant for divine memory, became a marker of limitation. You shift again. You remind yourself of the rules: don't argue in public. Don't sell wine to Christians. Don't walk alone at night. Don't forget who owns the land your home is built on, because you don't. Not really. You're not even allowed to repair the roof without permission in some places. It's not all bleak. Tomorrow, You'll meet friends in the small courtyard for morning prayers. There's a new shipment of books from Spain arriving, if the cart isn't raided. Your cousin is courting a scholar's daughter. There's talk of a Purim play next month. Laughter does find a way in here, even if it has to squeeze past the shutters, but still, when the fire dies down and the last whisper fades, there's a moment, just before you fall asleep, where you listen. Hard. For silence. Because in this place, silence doesn't mean peace. It means the next sound will decide your fate. You wake up before sunrise, not out of habit, but because someone is knocking at a neighbor's door. Not polite knocking, either. Fist against wood knocking. You freeze in your bed of straw and try not to breathe too loudly. It's 12:43, maybe 12:67, you lose track. The years blend when they're measured in fears. By the time you sit up, the neighbor's door has opened. You hear raised voices. No one screams. That's almost worse. You whisper a morning blessing under your breath, but it catches in your throat. You glance at your shoes. Should you run? Where, exactly? It's not the soldiers this time. It's worse. It's the church. See, there's a rumor going around. Not new, just recycled. A Christian boy has gone missing, or turned up dead, or sick, or strangely pale, depending on who you ask. Naturally, someone decided he was last seen near the Jewish quarter. Now people are murmuring blood libel, the idea that Jews use Christian children's blood in religious rituals, and you're expected to sleep through that. It began centuries ago, and each time it returns, it's somehow more creative. First it was Norwich in 1144, then Blois in 1171, then Trent in 1475, and far too many towns in between. Some victims became saints. Others became excuses for mass arrests. Show trials, or accidental drownings in riverbanks filled with rocks and silence. You look over at your younger brother. He's 8. Smart. Curious. He once asked why Christians believe Jews would drink blood when your own law forbids even eating rare meat. You didn't have the heart to explain that logic has nothing to do with survival. Historians still argue whether these accusations stemmed from theological panic, rural superstition, or cold political convenience. Most agree it was a tangled blend, noblemen fanning flames to erase debts, clergy using fear to bind communities tighter. After all, nothing unites a town like a common enemy. And who better than the ones already marked? You go about your day. You sell some linen. You help your father at the counter. You nod politely to regular Christian customers, but their eyes look different today. Suspicious. Or maybe that's just your nerves. The bishop is holding a public sermon this Sunday. He says it's about Lent. But you've heard he's been reading the Chronicle of St. William, the tale of the first blood libel, now copied and recopied in eager monastic scriptoria across Europe. It's not bedtime reading. That's the thing about rumors in the Middle Ages, they travel on parchment, sure, but mostly on breath. One monk writes a tale in Latin, another translates it into the local tongue, and suddenly it's gospel truth to the woman who buys your fish. She thinks you boil babies for Passover matzah. She doesn't even know when Passover is, and before you know it, her brother-in-law's looking for pitchforks. You duck into the synagogue before nightfall. It's the safest place to exhale, even if only for a moment. The prayer chants rise softly like smoke. Everyone's trying to keep the volume low. No one says blood out loud. That's superstition, too, naming a fear gives it form, but someone does mutter that a rabbi in England once tried to meet with the king to explain the truth, and the king responded by charging him double tax for being difficult. So now, everyone just whispers, here's your quirky tidbit, in some towns, to combat these accusations. Jews would dye their wine with spices or herbs so it didn't resemble blood at all, an ironic kind of evidence in a world where actual evidence didn't seem to matter much. That night, you lie awake again. This time, not because of footsteps, but because of the quiet. Too quiet. You remember the story of the boy in Lincoln. How the Jews were accused, tortured, and many burned. How the church canonized the dead child. How pilgrims came to pray at his tomb, and money changed hands, and suddenly the local abbey had a whole new revenue stream. You whisper a joke to yourself to stay calm. What's the difference between a bishop and a merchant? One prays for gold, the other profits from prayers. It's not funny. But it keeps the fear from swallowing you whole. You press your ear to the wall. Someone's crying again. Same neighbor. Her son was taken in for questioning last spring. They let him go, but something inside him stayed locked up. He doesn't talk much anymore. Maybe this will blow over. Maybe it's just a rumor, and the bishop will talk about Lent like he said. Maybe the missing child will come home, and everything will settle, but deep down, you know the pattern. This is how it begins. It always begins small, a whisper, a pamphlet, a pulpit shout. Then comes the pointing, the locking of gates, the demands for names. Then someone disappears. And suddenly, you're packing at midnight. Or worse, you're not packing at all, you're just waiting for the knock. Waiting for the lie to become law. You curl up tighter, back against the cool plaster wall, and try to remember the Hebrew words for hope. They don't come, your fingers ache from counting coins again. It's late, and the flame in your oil lamp is guttering. You're squinting, trying to make sure the sums are right, because if they're not, the consequences won't be measured in missed profit. They'll be measured in accusations. Tonight's bedtime story isn't about monsters or magic. It's about toll collectors. Not the ones at bridges, but the ones that come for you. You see, you're not just living in this city. You're renting your very right to exist. That's how it works for Jews in many parts of medieval Europe. You're not a full subject of the realm. You're a guest of the crown, or the duke, or the bishop, or whoever owns the patch of dirt your family walks on. And like all guests, you can be asked to leave. Or pay. Or both. The term is servi camerae regis, servants of the royal chamber. It sounds noble. It's not. It means the king owns you. Not in chains, but in taxes. The king protects you, sort of. In theory. In exchange, you pay special taxes that Christians don't. Annual taxes. Marriage taxes. Inheritance taxes. Taxes when you buy land. Taxes when you die. And sometimes, taxes just for the fun of it. One English king called it tallage. Another called it feathering the nest. You call it not sleeping. It gets worse. Sometimes, they tax the community as a whole. A lump sum. 5,000 marks by midsummer, the order says, and no instructions on how. So you and your neighbors pool money, pawn valuables, cancel weddings, and pray no one falls ill, because the coin set aside for medicine is now going to the crown. Historians still debate whether these taxes were purely financial tools or deliberately coercive. Some argue that the monarchs genuinely wanted to protect Jews as a revenue source, others point to periods where the same monarchs allowed pogroms, then seized Jewish assets afterward. You know which theory feels more accurate when you're lying awake at night with your door double-barred. One odd detail: in parts of 14th century France, tax assessors would enter Jewish homes and value your furniture and kitchenware to make sure you weren't hiding wealth. A silver spoon meant another coin. A second pair of boots meant suspicion. You learn early to live small. Your cousin tries to laugh it off. At least we're too poor to be robbed properly. But you've seen rich Jews stripped of everything, then fined for resisting. Wealth isn't a shield. Sometimes, it's a target painted in gold. You leave your shop late and pass the town hall. There's a new notice nailed to the door. You don't stop to read it. You know it isn't for you. Laws are posted, but the Jewish quarter hears of them secondhand. Often too late to adjust. Instead, you go home and check the locked box where your family hides their last few silver coins. Not under the floorboards, that's the first place they'd look. You keep them in a cracked jar behind your mother's spices. Cinnamon hides many secrets. The curfew bell rings. You hear it every night, but tonight it sounds smug. There's a knock, just one. You jump. It's your uncle. He's pale, out of breath. The city tax collector came to his door an hour ago, demanding an adjustment. A new levy. No reason given. No paper either, just 2 soldiers and a bag. The family huddles in your one-room home. Someone makes weak tea. Your uncle's wife holds her arms tight around herself like a second cloak. No one says it, but everyone's thinking the same thing. What if they come again tomorrow, and it's your door they knock on? You're not a criminal. But that doesn't matter. The next morning, your community leaders gather in the synagogue courtyard. They speak softly, heads bent. Some propose negotiating with the bishop. Others suggest contacting a friendly noble who once borrowed money. One man offers to sell his books. Another offers to sell his daughter's dowry. Sacrifices begin early when survival is on the table. That afternoon, someone paints a red smear on your neighbor's door. You scrape it off quietly. The symbolism is clear, though. You're next. You try to focus on mundane things, counting parchment sheets, inventorying cloth bolts. But numbers blur. Your hands tremble when you light the Sabbath candle. Not from reverence, though you wish that were the reason. One Sabbath evening, you hear music drifting from the Christian quarter. There's a festival. Laughter. The kind of laughter that makes you feel like a ghost pressing your ear to the window of someone else's life. You tell yourself that the music won't reach the tax collector's ears, but the collector doesn't need to hear music. He only listens to coin. You drift off at last, heart slowed by exhaustion rather than peace. In your dreams, you count coins that melt into wax, then water, then nothing. And when you reach for the jar behind the cinnamon, it's gone. The toll has been taken. It's market day, and the cobblestone square is louder than usual. Clattering carts, hawkers shouting over each other, chickens that somehow always escape the coop and make a run for the cheese stall. You stand at your small table, ledger in hand, doing the quiet math of risk and return. You are a moneylender. Which is to say, you make enemies simply by existing. It wasn't always your family's trade. But somewhere down the line, church law banned Christians from charging interest. Usury, they called it, a sin and a scandal. So the job passed to Jews, who weren't bound by the same rules. Not that it made things easy. Today, a local tailor borrows 20 silver coins to buy wool for winter coats. You write down his name, the amount, and the agreed interest. He signs with a shaky hand. He'll repay in 3 months, or so he says, and if he doesn't, you won't send thugs. You don't have any. You won't take his home. You're not legally allowed to own Christian property. All you can do is show the contract, if the magistrate agrees to look at it. Odds are he won't. Not if the debtor is Christian and you are. Inconveniently, not. Still, you lend. It's what you do. It's what keeps bread on the table, shoes on the children, and maybe, just maybe, enough saved to bribe the guards when the next accusation rolls in. Historians still argue whether medieval Jewish lenders were economic scapegoats or pragmatic survivors. The truth? Likely both. You'd rather trade in spices or silk, but those markets are sewn shut with Christian guild laws. So here you are, counting coins, building resentment one interest payment at a time. You keep your records obsessively neat. Hebrew in one column, Latin in another. Dates, names, repayment plans. You've seen friends accused of forgery, even with the facts on their side. You've seen contracts burned in a courtroom fire by accident. So you keep duplicates. You keep backups of backups. Still, you're not stupid. You keep your tone soft, your posture deferential, and your house dark at night. One stone through the window and this whole fragile life shatters. Here's a fringe detail. In some parts of Italy, Jewish lenders were required to wear special badges even during transactions, just to remind borrowers who they were dealing with. As if the accent or yarmulke weren't clue enough, this morning, a priest passed your stall and made the sign of the cross. Not unusual. But his gaze lingered on your coins, and you didn't like the look in his eyes. He muttered something about Judas Silver. You smiled and bowed. He didn't smile back. You finish your day, pack your ledger with a cloth wrap, and head home before dusk. That's the rule. Jewish business must close before curfew. One of your neighbors tried staying open late once. Someone said he cheated a customer. His house burned that night. No arrests were made. You sit down to dinner, bread, lentils, maybe a scrap of fish if the children haven't found it first. Someone asks how the day went. You say quiet, which means no one threatened me. It's a decent day. Your cousin bursts in after sunset. His tunic is torn, and he's bleeding at the lip. A debtor didn't want to repay. Called him a thief. Threw a punch before he could explain. A small crowd gathered, and someone shouted Christ killer. He ran before it got worse. You patch him up with vinegar and cloth. No complaints. Just a tired look, like this is all part of the job, and it is. The thing no one tells you is how often Jewish lenders forgave debts. Not out of charity, though sometimes that too, but out of sheer necessity. Better to cancel a loan than risk a riot. Better to be seen as merciful than to push the contract and end up dragged from your home. Even the most meticulous bookkeeping won't protect you from a bad mood. One time, a debtor gave you a chicken instead of coin. Another time, a child. You refused both. People said you had standards. They laughed. You didn't. You spend the evening copying a passage from Proverbs. Something about wisdom and understanding. The ink smears slightly. You're tired. You whisper the verse to yourself, slowly, rhythmically. It helps you breathe again. Then the knock comes, soft. Cautious. You open it slowly. It's the tailor. The one who borrowed 20 silver. He's early. He presses a small pouch into your hand. Inside, 15 coins. Not 20. Please, he says, voice cracking, my daughter's sick. I'll bring the rest. He looks like he's been crying. You nod. You say it's all right. You won't charge extra. He hugs you, then catches himself. Thank you, truly. As he walks away, you close the door. Lock it. Bolt it. And lean your forehead against the wood. He might return. He might not. But for now, he's alive. And so are you. That'll have to be enough. You hear a knock, not like the others. This one's careful. Familiar. You open the door just a crack and see your neighbor, Yitzhak, standing there with a cloak pulled high over his ears. He's not wearing his cap. You know what that means. He steps inside quickly, shuts the door behind him, and doesn't speak for a moment. His eyes flit toward the window. Then he says it, low and flat, I went to mass this morning. You don't respond right away. You've known Yitzhak since you were children. He played the fool at your cousin's wedding. He cried when your father passed. And now? Now he's baptized, not because he believes. Because he has no choice. That's how it starts. A sick wife. An unpaid debt, a Christian creditor who says, just convert, and I'll forgive it. Sometimes it's not even said aloud. Just a glance toward the hungry child and the knowledge that the soup kitchen on the other side of town only serves Christians. You sit him down. Pour warm water over his hands. He doesn't cry. You wish he would. It'd feel more honest. Historians still debate how many conversions were truly forced versus voluntary under pressure. But if choosing between poverty, prison, or baptism counts as free will, then sure, call it voluntary. Yitzhak says he'll try to keep coming to the minyan, quietly, late at night. He hasn't told his children yet. His wife refused to go through with it. That's another issue. Mixed households draw even more suspicion. You ask him what name he gave at the font. Thomas, he says. You bite back the joke. A doubting Thomas already. He smiles, barely. Then looks like he wants to disappear into the chair. You've seen this before. Some converts keep kosher in secret. Some pray in Latin by day, Hebrew by night. Some spend their lives apologizing to both sides, never Jewish enough, never Christian enough, always suspect, you try to reassure him. You're still you say. He nods. But you both know it's not about identity. It's about exposure. He's now the bridge everyone wants to burn. Later that week, you attend a quiet gathering in the rabbi's cellar. The Torah scrolls are brought out under candlelight, wrapped in cloth faded from too much hiding. A few people nod toward Yitzhak when he arrives. Some smile. One woman leaves. Trust is a slow, cautious animal. Once it's spooked, it doesn't come back for a while. Here's a fringe tidbit. In 14th century Spain, so many Jews converted under duress that they got their own label, conversos or new Christians. Many rose in society, only to be targeted later during the Inquisition, accused of practicing Judaism in secret. The same church that welcomed them and eventually hunted them down. You wonder sometimes what it's like for Yitzhak on the other side. Does the Mass feel hollow? Do the neighbors smile more now? Or does every kindness feel like a test? You remember a story the rabbi told once. A man falls into a river and prays for rescue. A boat passes, then a second, then a third. He says no each time, God will save me. When he drowns and meets the Almighty, he asks why he didn't help. God replies, I sent 3 boats. Maybe conversion is one of those boats. Maybe it isn't. Hard to say when the water's this cold. You hear that another man in the quarter, Dov, the candlemaker, has also disappeared. Some say he ran. Others whisper he's been taken to a monastery. You know what that means. No letters. No visits. Just robes and silence. Monasteries sometimes rescued Jewish children, too, especially orphans. Orphans didn't need to convert voluntarily. They could be baptized and raised by monks, for their own good. You've seen mothers weep outside the city gates, begging for their children back. They never got them. You spend the next few days watching shadows more than people. Who's walking with whom? Who's avoiding eye contact? Who crosses the street near the church? The fear isn't that someone will convert. It's that they'll talk afterward. The church loves a good convert's tale. Especially a dramatic one. Tears, guilt, a warning to the stubborn Jews who haven't yet seen the light. You once heard a public disputation where a former rabbi, now a monk, argued against the Talmud while your own teachers were forced to listen in silence. It's theater. And you're the villain. You sit in the courtyard with Yitzhak one last time. He looks tired. He says he's moving, farther into the Christian quarter. It's easier that way, he says. I won't bring trouble to the community. You nod. You both know what he's really saying. He leaves before the moon rises. You watch his shape disappear into the fog. You don't know if you'll see him again. You go back inside. Close the door. Bolt it, then you blow out the candle and sit in the dark for a long, long time. The fog hangs low over Prague tonight, thick enough that the gas lamps flicker like uncertain thoughts. You pull your cloak tighter, but not for warmth. There's a rumor in the air. Curling through the alleys like smoke, half hope, half myth. A golem walks the quarter, no one says it loudly. Not even the children. But you hear it murmured in doorways, the rabbi did it. He made a guardian. You smile, just barely. The golem, crafted from clay, brought to life with holy words, too strong for a human heart. He doesn't eat. He doesn't sleep. He just waits. For danger. For violence. For a reason to rise. In a world where Jews never feel safe, the idea of a silent protector is deliciously comforting. Like the golem is some divine insurance policy hiding behind a chimney. He doesn't knock. He just arrives when you need him. Of course, he's not real. Probably. You've never seen him. But you've seen the need for him. A butcher's shop was vandalized last week, crosses smeared in animal blood. Someone's child was kicked in the street for not bowing to a passing friar. The tax agents are circling again. And someone swears they saw a golem-shaped shadow near the synagogue wall the night after the insult. You wouldn't bet your life on the golem. But then again, you don't bet on anything anymore. Historians still argue whether the golem of Prague was born from medieval folklore or Renaissance imagination. Some believe Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezalel, the Maharal of Prague, truly crafted him in the 16th century. Others say it was a later invention. A kind of psychological bandage wrapped in mysticism and mud, but what matters more is this: the people believe it. And belief can be louder than fact, especially when fear is the louder twin. You remember the tale. The rabbi formed the golem from river clay. Inscribed emet, truth, on its forehead. It stood, obeyed, protected. And when it grew too powerful, he wiped away the first letter, turning emet to met, death. The golem collapsed. You think about that word often. Truth. And how fragile it is. Your neighbor's son is convinced he saw glowing eyes behind the synagogue the other night. He tells it like a ghost story, wide-eyed, breathless. His mother hushes him, but not sternly. Secretly, everyone wants it to be true. Not because they believe in monsters, but because they crave a protector bigger than fear. Here's a quirky twist for you. In some later versions of the story, the golem grows too smart, even demanding to read Torah. The rabbi panics. Protection is one thing. Consciousness? That's another problem entirely. Some nights, you catch yourself whispering as you walk home, if you're real, walk with me. Just tonight. Silly, right? But your footsteps still echo too loudly, and the alley seems darker than usual. Then one morning, you wake to news. Someone was caught trying to light a fire near the synagogue. The man was drunk, or said he was. He's in the stocks now. No one was hurt, but here's the strange part: someone found him unconscious before he could finish. No one knows who. He had bruises on his chest, 2 perfect circles, like thumbs pressed through his coat. No one saw anything, except a small girl, maybe 7. She says she saw a big man made of smoke walk through the wall and vanish. You glanced toward the synagogue roof that night. There's nothing there. But you leave an extra candle burning just in case. The thing is, whether the golem exists or not, he says something truer than stone: you need protection. You always have. Because your walls are made of wood, not iron. Because the guards are sometimes the threat. Because the law that claims to shield you is the same law that taxes your breath. The golem? He's the bedtime story that fights back. While the world hurls stories of blood libel and betrayal at your people, the golem is yours. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't bow. He just stands, and if belief is all you have, maybe it's enough. One day, a traveling scribe visits the quarter. He's Christian, but friendly. Curious. He asks about the legend. The rabbi only smiles. There are things too heavy for parchment, he says. The scribe laughs nervously. He writes it down anyway. That night, you rest your hand on the wall of the synagogue before heading home. You don't say a prayer. Just a pause. Just a touch, then you go inside, bolt the door, and sleep a little deeper. Because real or not, something stood here once. And maybe, just maybe, it still does. The wind howls through the thatched eaves tonight, the kind of wind that feels like a bad omen in a cheap disguise. You're already awake when the bells ring. Church bells. But not for a wedding. Not for a feast, for a funeral. By morning, the market is buzzing. A child has died, 3 years old, blonde, and buried too quickly for comfort. No illness reported. No signs of struggle. Just gone. And before his parents have even washed their hands of grief, the whispers begin. They say he was last seen near the well. Your heart tightens. You know that tone. Not curiosity. Not mourning. It's a tone that sniffs for a scapegoat. You, again. The rumor spreads faster than breath. Within hours. It mutates. The child didn't just die, he was taken. No, he was drained. No, he was seen in a Jew's cellar. Or was it a bakery? The story has no face, no facts, just direction. It points toward your quarter. Like a weather vane spinning in fear, historians still argue whether these sudden flare-ups were sparked by clergy, jealous merchants, or just mass hysteria. The truth is, once the rumor starts, it doesn't need a reason. It just needs repetition. You hear it at the butcher's stall. At the well. Even from children. And somehow, each version is more detailed than the last, and the well. Oh, the well, you use it daily. Everyone does. It's not even your well. But today, you notice a new sign scrawled on the stone, a crude red cross. Someone's idea of holy graffiti. You draw your cloak tighter and walk home by back alleys. That night, you gather in the synagogue for emergency prayers. The rabbi recites psalms that feel too familiar. Not from tradition, but from repetition. You've used these same prayers too many times, after fires, after mobs, after bad news arrives in a scroll sealed with wax and dread. Someone mentions the bishop is investigating. Another says he's already decided. You can't tell which is worse. A man named Eli tries to reassure the group. There's no proof, he says. They can't act without proof. But his hands won't stop shaking, and he doesn't meet anyone's eyes. Proof isn't the issue. Proof is whatever they need it to be. You think of Blois, 1171. Over 30 Jews burned after an accusation like this. A dead child and an idle rumor. No trial. Just smoke. Your cousin asks a fair question. If we didn't do it last time, and the time before, why do they keep believing we will now? You don't answer. No one does. Here's a strange little detail. In some towns, Jews were required to remove their shoes before entering Christian courtrooms, as a sign of humility. In others, they had to swear oaths on bizarre objects, like pierced pigskin or knives, designed to humiliate. And still, even after all that, their testimony was often dismissed as invalid. You go home. Bar the door. Place a small satchel by the window, just in case. It contains a few coins, a comb, a prayer book, and a torn letter from your grandfather written in Judeo-Arabic. It says, simply, hold fast. This world does not deserve your fear. You try to sleep. But the wind picks up. You think you hear someone outside. A stone clatters down the street. No one knocks. That's both a blessing and a threat. The next morning, a small crowd has gathered at the edge of the Jewish quarter. Not angry. Not yet. But watching. Waiting. The well is cordoned off. A priest mutters incantations over the water. A guard scowls at you as you walk past. He doesn't know your name. Doesn't need to. And then, like some cosmic joke, it rains. Just a drizzle. Enough to muddy the streets and wet the parchment nailed to the church door, a call for an inquiry. Not a trial, an inquiry. You know how that ends. You skip the market. So does everyone else. Bread goes unbought. Soap unsold. Fear is bad for business. That evening, a boy runs through the quarter yelling, they say another child is sick. He doesn't stop running. You can't blame him. A neighbor begins boarding his windows. Another packs early. The rabbi says stay calm. You nod, but your feet are already itchy. The next day passes like a held breath. You wait for a mob, but none comes. Just more glances. More mutters. Someone spits near your shoe. You don't look up, and then. Quiet, the child's mother is seen crying in church. But no one mentions Jews today. Not in public. The bishop is silent. The guards go back to loitering, not glaring. You wait another day. 2. 3. No fire. No arrests. No expulsion, just silence, and that, somehow, is worse. Because now you're waiting for the next rumor. The next death. The next excuse, you whisper a line from the Psalms as you light the Sabbath candles, though I walk through the valley of the shadow. You pause before finishing it, because here in the ghetto, that valley runs through your front door. There's a letter today. Not a friendly one. Not a bill either, though at this point, the difference feels academic. It's sealed with wax stamped in red, the city's crest, half eagle, half cross. That's never a good combination. Your hands tremble as you open it. The letter doesn't accuse. It summons. A formal appearance before the city council. Date, time, location. No explanation. You read it twice. Then a third time. Then you sit very, very still. Your wife sees the look on your face and doesn't ask. She just pulls the bread off the fire before it burns. You don't eat it. This isn't new. You've heard the pattern before. First, a summons. Then, a list of questions, some fair, most not. Then maybe a fine. Or maybe jail. Or maybe, nothing. Just a warning, remember your place. You walk to the synagogue to consult the rabbi. He's seen it before, too. He nods solemnly and pulls a scroll off the shelf. Responsa, questions answered by sages long ago, trying to survive a world that didn't like them very much. One entry catches your eye: if summoned unjustly by a magistrate, answer with truth, but not the whole truth. You know what that means. Speak softly. Speak carefully. Assume you are being baited. The next morning, you dress plainly. You wear no jewelry, even your wedding ring. You carry no books. You tie your belt twice, not for superstition, but because it helps your hands stay steady. You pass the market square. A few faces glance your way. Some look curious. One or two, satisfied. You keep walking. The city hall is built like a fortress. Stone walls, iron-braced doors, and a coldness that starts in the floor and seeps into your bones. A clerk takes your name and gestures toward a long bench. You wait. And wait. Every second echoes. Finally, they call you in. The chamber isn't large, but it's tall. Meant to make you feel small. It works. The scribe dips his quill. A bishop sits to the left, two magistrates on the right. No one smiles. One asks if you know why you're here. You shake your head, because you truly don't. They start with small questions. Your business. Your contacts. Who you've sold to. Who owes you money? You answer calmly. But then they start shifting. Do you sell bread? No. Do you ever sell wine to Christians? No. Have you seen children in your workshop? Not unless accompanied by their parents. You see where this is going. The questions twist tighter. You mention your ledger. Offer to show it. They wave it off. Then, suddenly, do you know a man named Peter the Younger? Your heart jumps. The tailor's boy. The one who paid you late. You nod. He borrowed 20 silver. They exchange glances. The bishop scribbles something. Did you touch him? You blink. Touch. They clarify. Did you ever lay hands on him? In business? In anger? Even in prayer? Your voice tightens. Never. The scribe keeps writing. Historians still argue whether these interrogations were meant to uncover real threats or simply to remind Jews who held the power. The truth is, it doesn't matter. The process is the punishment. If they don't find what they want, they'll invent it. If they do, it's probably because you said too much. Eventually, they let you go. No charges. No fines. Not today. You step out of the hall, blinking into the sunlight like you've come out of a dungeon. Your legs are weak. You don't realize until you've walked 2 blocks that you've been holding your breath. You make it home. Your wife is there. Your daughter. The door is still on its hinges. That's your miracle for the day. Here's your quirky historical detail. In some cities, Jews had to pay a tolerance fee just to remain in the city after being summoned to court. even if found innocent. A literal price for not being guilty. That night, you sit by the window. You don't light the candle. Just listen to the creak of the rafters and the sigh of the wind. Someone laughs down the alley. Not at you, you think. But you still flinch. The next day, you're back in the market. People glance at you differently. Some out of pity. Others out of pleasure. You're a reminder, the Jew who got summoned and walked back out. A curiosity, your cousin whispers that you were lucky. You nod. You don't feel lucky, you feel watched. From now on, you speak even softer. You lend even less. You wait longer before answering. Because now, your name is in a book. Somewhere, on a page turned by a man with power, and once you're on their paper, you're never really off it. You wake up to noise. Not shouting, not fire, but hammers. It's strange how even a good sound can carry dread when you've lived this long with suspicion in your bones. You pull back the shutters, and there they are, laborers, covered in dust, laying stone outside the Jewish quarter gate, a new wall. Thicker. Higher. With iron-studded doors. No one asked for it. No one warned you. By noon, a decree arrives, posted like a trophy on your synagogue door: Jews are to remain within the quarter after sunset. Entry and exit will be restricted. Gate to be locked nightly by the city watch. The ink isn't even dry when the gossip starts. Some Christian says it's for your protection. Another claims it's punishment for that thing with the child. You're not sure which insult stings more. You've lived in this quarter all your life. You thought of it as home. Imperfect, yes, but yours. Now it feels like a holding pen. Historians still debate whether medieval ghettos were meant to protect Jews from violence or to keep Jews contained like livestock. Truthfully, both were likely true. They were always justified as one, but functioned as the other. The wall goes up fast. Too fast. Like the city had it planned long ago, just waiting for the right moment to strike hammer to stone. And suddenly, streets you used to walk freely now lead only back to themselves. You feel like a rat in a maze, one where the cheese is taxed and the trap is blessed by a bishop. Here's a strange and sad little fact: in 1412, the Crown of Aragon ordered Jewish homes to be marked with yellow paint. Not the people, just the walls. As if the buildings themselves needed to be shamed. As if memory were contagious. That evening, you take a walk, one last time, through the lanes that used to lead outside the quarter. The butcher's street, the candlemaker's alley, the slope that curves toward the river. At each one, a new wall now stares back at you, unapologetic. You see kids drawing on it already. Not flowers. Not games. Just crude stars, and even cruder words. The city provides a gatekeeper. A Christian. He doesn't speak much. Just locks the gate at sundown and unlocks it in the morning. He has a key, and you do not. You once had a dog like that, loyal to whoever fed it, and the curfew? It's enforced. Harshly. You hear the story by candlelight. A man named Abram ran late closing his stall. Tried to return home after dark. Caught by guards. They beat him until he couldn't walk for a week. Now, everyone hurries. Business ends early. Candles are snuffed by twilight. The city that used to merely threaten you has now boxed you in, but something else happens, too. Something quieter. The quarter pulls closer. A boy starts a lending library with books passed hand to hand. Someone starts baking more loaves than they need, so the widow 2 doors down always has bread. You find yourself talking to neighbors you used to ignore. The wall doesn't just close, it compresses. You have less space now. But more connection. Your cousin, the one who's always bitter, says, if they won't let us leave, we'll make the inside better. And he does. He paints murals on the courtyard walls, bright reds, blues, gold leaf if he can smuggle it in. They tell stories of David, Esther, the Exodus. Your children sit and listen like they've never heard them before. There's a kind of hope growing here. not big enough to fight armies, but stubborn enough to bloom through cracks. One night, you climb to the roof of your house. You sit on the tiles, wrapped in your cloak, and stare past the wall. The stars are still yours. The wind still reaches you. Even the moon doesn't care who locked the gate. You whisper the evening prayer, letting the word stretch longer than usual. There's comfort in syllables that haven't changed in centuries, even when everything else has. Then you climb down. The gate is locked, but your soul is not. Tonight, your daughter brings home a song. She hums it under her breath while setting the table, her voice light, unaware. The tune is catchy, childish, meant to charm, but the lyrics stop your heart cold. Don't eat the bread the Jews have made, or you'll fall sick, then in the grave. You drop the clay cup you were holding. It doesn't shatter, just rolls, awkwardly, under the bench. Where did you hear that? You ask, she shrugs. At the well. The baker's boy was singing it. You don't answer. You just nod slowly, as if that's normal. As if that song hasn't haunted your people for centuries, dressed in different rhymes but always the same poison. They are not like us. You light a candle. Not for the Sabbath. Not for memory. But because the dark feels heavier tonight, your wife reads your face and says nothing. Just quietly serves the stew, pretending not to notice that your hand shakes as you pass the bread. These stories, songs, whispers, side-eyed jokes, are older than your grandfather. Older than the walls of your quarter. You've learned that hatred doesn't always come in the form of fire or mobs. Sometimes it comes as a lullaby. Historians still debate whether anti-Jewish folklore was state-directed propaganda or spontaneous popular superstition. Either way, it worked. The stories shaped minds before facts ever had a chance to enter the room. You've heard them all. Jews poison wells, Jews kidnap children, Jews desecrate the host, Jews have tails, yes, tails. In some corners of Europe, people actually believe Jews were born with tails or horns, hidden under their clothes. It's laughable until you remember people were beaten, or worse, for refusing to disrobe and prove they weren't hiding a devil's mark. You remember once, years ago, walking through a Christian market and feeling eyes on your back. A boy asked his mother if you had goat legs. She smacked him, but not for believing it, for saying it too loud. The worst part isn't the stories. It's how easily they spread. A baker's boy sings a rhyme. A mother repeats it. A priest folds it into a sermon. A bishop turns it into a policy. And suddenly, your shop is boycotted, your tax is doubled, your nephew can't go to school, and no one remembers why. It's just how things are. You once tried correcting someone. A merchant accused you of watering down your wine with frog's blood. You laughed, gently, and said, "We're not even allowed to eat frogs." He didn't laugh back. Just walked away and never bought from you again. The rumor did more than offend, it stuck. Now, you stay quiet. You let the lies float, thicken, settle into the cracks of society like dust that no one bothers to sweep. But tonight? Tonight your daughter sang the words. You tuck her in, brushing her curls behind her ear, and ask gently, "Do you know what that song means?" She nods, unsure. That we're bad? Your throat tightens. You want to say, "No, that's just ignorance." But you've seen what ignorance does when given a sword, so instead, you tell her this: there are people who don't understand who we are. They've never sat at our table, or danced at our weddings, or wept with us at funerals. So they fill in the blanks with shadows. She nods, eyes wide. So we show them. Sometimes, you say. Other times. We stay strong. And quiet. And kind. And then, softer, but we never sing their songs. She nods. You kiss her forehead, blow out the candle, and sit alone for a while. You think about a medieval manuscript you once saw, smuggled from Spain. It showed a Jew with hooked nose, red hat, stabbing a wafer with a knife while demons danced behind him. The caption, "The Truth Revealed." You burned the copy. But not before memorizing it. You wanted to know what they believed. Because if you know the lie, maybe you can see it coming next time. The next morning, you walk your daughter to the well. The baker's boy is there. He sees you, stiffens. You kneel, eye level with him. That song, you say, gently, is not true. It's never been true. He looks scared. But he listens. You stand, nod at the baker, and leave. Maybe he'll forget. Maybe not, but the words are out there now. In the street. In the songs. In the walls, and once the world has made you a monster in its imagination, it doesn't take much for it to hunt you like one. You return home. Light another candle. Teach your daughter a new song, one from your grandmother, about olive trees and moonlight and the sound of safety, however faint, and for tonight. That has to be enough. The calendar shifts again, and with it, so does your anxiety. A festival approaches, not one of yours, but theirs, Easter. The bells ring longer, the church doors swing wider, and the sermons grow louder. Louder and sharper. You don't need to attend to know what's being said. You've heard the patterns before. Passion plays, retellings of the crucifixion, and always, always, a nod to the villains, Judas. The Jews, you keep your head down, but the tension seeps in like damp through stone. The baker hurries you out of his stall. The tailor won't make eye contact. Even your usual tax collector delivers the bill without a smirk. That's when you really know something's coming. Your friend Haim remembers a year in Spire when the Passion sermon ended with "May the betrayers be punished." That night, 10 homes burned. No arrests. Just prayers the next morning for the unfortunate fire. You've seen this enough times to know how it works. In Lent, the streets empty of meat, and fill with suspicion. And by Holy Week, the children are reenacting crucifixions in the alleys. One of them, a boy, maybe 10, crucified a doll last year. Said its name was Isaac. You hear this and laugh, hollow. At least he didn't use a real one. Historians still argue whether Easter-related violence against Jews was centrally organized or spontaneous mob behavior stirred by ritual. But again, the result is the same: shattered windows, broken ribs, fear that lingers for generations. This year, your plan is simple: don't leave the quarter. Don't engage. Pray quietly. Hope the sermon ends with forgiveness, not fire, but someone doesn't get the message. 2 days before Easter, a boy from outside the quarter disappears. 10 years old. Last seen selling eggs near the river. You hear about it within hours. And you already know what's coming. The boy's mother, panicked, sobbing, says he would never run away. His uncle says he was seen talking to a Jew. That's all it takes. A knight arrives that night. Not one of the usual guards. This one wears a red sash and a long sword. You recognize his type. He's not here to ask questions. He's here to deliver a message. He walks the edge of the quarter, slowly, visibly. Then posts a notice at the gate: anyone with information about the child should come forward immediately. Silence will be treated as guilt. You want to scream. To ask, when have we ever taken children? But you know better. Logic is not a language fear understands. You huddle with the others in the prayer house. The rabbi speaks softly: we stay indoors. We fast. We pray. We do not respond to provocations. Someone asks, and if they come anyway? The rabbi hesitates. Then we hide what we can, and trust in the eternal. You go home and pack a small bag. Again. The same one. You add one more item this time: a silver kiddush cup from your father. It's engraved with his name, now faded. You place it on top like a shield. Here's an odd historical tidbit: in some places, Christian authorities would test Jews by placing consecrated bread in their homes, then accuse them of desecration when it mysteriously cracked or crumbled. Yes, booby-trapped bread. You remember this every time a stranger offers you food. The next day is Holy Thursday. The churches are packed. The bells echo like thunder. And from your window, you see a small crowd forming near the square. You know what it means when groups form and no one smiles, then, a knock, not loud. Not frantic. But careful, you freeze, it's the bishop's scribe, he bows. Polite. There's been an inquiry, he says. We'd appreciate your cooperation. You nod. What else can you do? They ask questions. Not of guilt, yet, but of knowledge. Did you see the boy? Do you know anyone who did? Can you verify your whereabouts? You tell the truth. Which is to say, you say only what won't hurt you. They leave with a shallow bow, but you know the game, you wait 3 days. Then the child is found, alive. Sleeping under a fisherman's dock. Cold, but unharmed. He'd run off after a beating at home. Too scared to return, you don't celebrate. No one does, because though the child lived, the accusation didn't die. It just burrowed deeper. And next time, someone may not be so lucky. You sit at your table that night and reread an old letter from your uncle, who fled to Salonika after his town turned. He wrote, "The sun is warmer here, but the shadows still know our names." You fold the letter. Blow out the candle, and whisper a prayer, not for safety, but for forgetfulness. Let them forget our names, just long enough to leave us alone. You've gotten used to hardship, restrictions, rumors, even riots, but money? That's the real cage. And it always tightens when the kingdom needs war. A new tax is announced this morning. Not on all citizens. Just the Jews. They're calling it a protection levy, which is a masterstroke of irony. You must now pay to be protected from the very city that might burn your home down if you don't. The rate isn't small either. A full tenth of all property, livestock, and movable wealth. And it's retroactive, meaning you're now also in debt for what you didn't know you owed. You skim the notice. It lists names. Yours is there. So is your cousin's. So is a widow who hasn't left her home in weeks. There's no appeal. No discussion. Just a deadline. Historians still argue whether these medieval tolerance taxes were designed purely for financial gain or as veiled threats to keep Jewish communities submissive. But the records speak for themselves. Jews were taxed disproportionately and constantly, often as a condition of merely existing in the realm. You gather your ledgers that evening. Try to make sense of what you own, what you owe, what can be hidden. Your daughter watches you wrap silver spoons in cloth and tuck them into a crevice in the wall. She asks if you're moving, you say no. But part of you wants to. Some in the community consider fleeing, again. Maybe Poland, maybe the Ottoman Empire. You've heard the sultans are less inclined to burn people over bread. But flight means selling everything fast, hiding your faith, learning new laws. Again, you're tired of starting over. You walk to the rabbi's house. The council is meeting, counting, whispering, calculating. Everyone's anxious. Everyone's angry. But quietly. Always quietly, a young man named Simca speaks up. He wants to resist. We have nothing left to give, he says. What will we eat after we pay? The elder beside him answers, they don't care what you eat. They care what you owe. So the community does what it always does, rations, prays, sells heirlooms, and tightens belts. Again. You wonder what your great-grandfather gave up in a similar moment. Probably something silver. Maybe something sacred. Here's a quirky detail. In medieval England, records show that some Jewish communities paid taxes not in coin, but in pepper, saffron, or parchment. Not for flavor, because that's all they had left. You try that, too. You offer the tax agent bolts of cloth, a box of candles, 2 jars of ink. He accepts, barely disguising his contempt. You see it in his eyes. He's not here for goods. He's here for leverage, and this is what it's always been about. Money means movement. Taxes are shackles. You spend the next few weeks recovering. The house feels emptier. Your daughter notices the missing candlesticks during Shabbat. You tell her they were donated for the good of the community. She nods, not fully understanding, but respectful. In your heart, you wonder, how many more things must you sacrifice for the privilege of staying? The merchant next door, Yitzhak, doesn't survive the levy. His shop folds. His creditors come knocking. He packs his goods onto a donkey cart and disappears at dawn. No one says goodbye. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. Maybe he didn't know himself. Your wife starts cutting old robes into patches. She's preparing for leaner times. Again, and the strangest part. The tax isn't even enough. A week later, the bishop announces that the city's coffers are still too thin. There's talk of borrowing from the Jewish quarter. Forced loans. Repayable eventually. You laugh bitterly. What's the difference between a tax and a loan that isn't repaid? Nothing. Just spelling. That night, a page tears from the prayer book. You find it under the table, smudged and crumpled. The verse reads, "They have opened their mouths against me like a ravening lion. But you, O Lord, do not be far from me." You smooth it flat. Place it between pages. Not because you're superstitious, because it's been read too many times to forget. You hear the rumor before you see the parchment. As always, the whispers arrive first, faster than any messenger, sharper than any sword. They're calling a disputation. Your stomach knots. You already know what that means, a public debate, but not for truth. You still remember the last one, years ago. It wasn't a debate. It was a display. The church brought in a converted Jew, trained, confident, articulate. The rabbis were allowed to speak, yes, but only under threat. Not to persuade, just to submit. This time, they say, it will be more civilized. Held in the bishop's hall. Open to Christians and Jews alike. But you know better. It's theater. And the script was written long before any rabbi opened his mouth. The topic? Why Jews refuse to accept the Messiah. A trap, dressed as a question. Historians still argue how much autonomy Jews had during these forced disputations. Some say rabbis could decline, others say refusal brought imprisonment, or worse. In truth, once the stage was set, stepping off it meant exile or fire. This time, your own rabbi has been selected. He is gentle, learned, tired. He accepts with a grim nod. You walk with him to the synagogue that evening. He says nothing for a long while. Then, softly, "I don't debate to win. I debate to survive." That phrase echoes in your mind for days. The event draws a crowd. Not just townsfolk, clergy, students, merchants. Some bring children. Like it's a festival. There are guards at the door. Not to keep people out, to keep the Jews in. Inside, you sit in the back row, pressed between your cousin and a boy who fidgets with worry. Candles flicker. Scrolls are unrolled. And the man across from your rabbi begins. He is eloquent. He quotes Augustine, Jerome, even your own Talmud, but twisted. Bent like iron under fire. He smirks as he speaks, then your rabbi stands. He opens gently, quoting the Psalms in Hebrew and Latin. He explains patiently, drawing on Torah and centuries of commentary. He does not shout. He does not accuse. But you can tell, he is not allowed to ask questions. Only to defend. Here's your quirky historical moment, in the Disputation of Barcelona, 1263. Rabbi Nachmanides was given freedom to speak, only to be exiled afterward for being too convincing. That's the joke. If you win, they punish you. If you lose, they justify you. Today is no different. The bishop calls for decorum. The crowd chuckles at points. They're not here to listen. They're here to watch. The debate drags for hours. Your rabbi remains poised, but you can see it, his hands tremble under his sleeves. You realize what this is really about. It's not for the church. It's for the record. They'll write this down, twist it into doctrine, and point to it next time someone asks, "Why do the Jews still resist?" Afterward, no one claps. Just murmurs. You walk your rabbi home under cover of night. His face is drawn. He doesn't speak. That evening, your daughter asks, "Did he win?" You pause. He told the truth. She frowns. Then why do you look sad? You don't answer. The next day, the summary appears nailed to the cathedral door. It calls your rabbi polite but evasive. It praises the Christian side's patience and clarity. It ends with a recommendation: greater restrictions on Jewish teaching, for the sake of their souls. You tear it down. So does someone else, in another quarter. But the parchment is copied and copied again. Later that week, a Christian boy you've known for years avoids your eyes. A woman who used to buy candles from you starts walking an extra block to the other merchant. A page from the disputation is read aloud in the market square. Not all listen. But some nod, and so the debate continues, without you. Whispered, weaponized, and worn like armor, you visit your rabbi again. He sits near the ark, staring at a torn scroll that needs mending. He touches the parchment gently and says, "This isn't the first time they've tried to rewrite us. It won't be the last." You nod. Because you know now, it's not about what you believe. It's about who controls the ink. So, that night, you start copying texts by candlelight. Just small ones, prayers, psalms, fragments of commentary. You teach your daughter how to hold the quill. She writes the letter shin, slowly but proudly. Because if they're going to write your story for you, you'd better have a version of your own. There's an old man who lives near the gate, Reuven, nearly blind now, with parchment-thin skin and stories stacked higher than his shelves. He says this isn't the worst time. He says, "At least they let us bury our dead." You know he means it kindly. As reassurance, but it still makes your spine go cold, because now you're thinking about what could be next. Not just new taxes or louder sermons. Something final. Something permanent. A new edict is whispered today, nothing official, not yet. But enough to set teeth on edge. Jews may soon be banned from practicing medicine on Christians. You look around your narrow street and realize just how many livelihoods that will crush. Your neighbor, Mayor, tends wounds and boils for half the city. His hands are cleaner than any monk's. But that won't save him. You hear the justification from a customer at the apothecary: "It's unholy to let a Christ killer touch the body of the faithful." He says it casually, like repeating a recipe. Historians still debate whether this fear was superstition or politics. Did they truly think Jews poisoned patients? Or were Christian doctors simply tired of losing customers to people with better treatments and steadier hands? You know the answer doesn't matter, the effect is the same. That night, Mayor knocks on your door. He's pale, sweating, clutching a satchel of herbs and tools. "They took a boy from his bed," he whispers. "A servant. Said I cursed him." You stare. "Where is he?" "Gone." You make him sit. Light a candle. He shakes his head, muttering, "I saved his father from fever. The mother gave me coins. Now she says I hexed the child." And again, you see it clearly, the same trick, played in a new costume. When things go well, they thank you. When they don't, they accuse you. You remember stories from your grandfather, from far-off places. In Sicily, entire families expelled. In England, locked into towers. In Mainz, slaughtered for breathing during a thunderstorm that ruined the bishop's wine barrels. Always an excuse. Never a reason. You try to calm Mayor. But later, when he's gone, you pack another small satchel. You no longer think of these bags as temporary. They've become a second wardrobe, items of flight, not choice. Here's a strange little historical detail: in some towns, Jewish physicians were officially tolerated because nobles preferred their treatments, but those same physicians could be executed if a patient died, even of natural causes. Useful until blamed might as well be carved into the gate of the quarter. 2 days later, the edict is posted. Hand-copied in uneven Latin, then nailed to the market pole: "No Jew shall treat, touch or medicate any Christian. It spreads like rot. You close your stall early. You see Mayor boarding up his window. Even his herbs can't fix what's coming. The same afternoon, a priest publicly burns a scroll he claims was filled with demonic incantations. It was actually a medical text. Ibn Sina, translated. But try explaining that over the shouting. By evening, the quarter is quieter than usual. No kids playing. No music. Just the occasional knock of carpentry, people reinforcing doors that once felt solid enough. At synagogue, the prayers are soft. No melodies tonight. Just words. Dry, cracked, familiar. You sit beside Reuven, the old man with the sharp memory. He leans over and murmurs, "I told you. At least they let us bury our dead." And you realize, that, too, is not guaranteed. You go home, light your lamp low, and open your notebook. You write down the names of the people who can no longer work: Meir the healer, Sarah the scribe, the widow who sold dye to both Christians and Jews. All cut off, at once. You underline their names. Because forgetting them would be another loss. Later, you teach your daughter how to draw Hebrew letters from memory. She giggles at the crooked aleph, then tries again. You don't tell her why this matters. Not yet, but deep down, you know. You're passing on more than language. You're passing on resilience, because someday, they may take away your voice. And she'll need to remember how to speak anyway. It's the smell that wakes you, wood smoke, thick and sour. Not the sweet curl of a hearth fire. No, this is different. Bigger. Angry, you rush to the window, heart hammering. Over the rooftops, plumes of black smoke stain the dawn. Not close, but close enough. The Christian quarter. Near the plaza, your first thought isn't what's burning, it's who will they blame. Within an hour, the rumors are flying faster than the pigeons. A fire in the spice merchant's row. 3 shops gone. 1 body, 2 charred to identify. Someone says arson. Someone else says witchcraft. But before noon, the whisper hardens into a shape you know too well. A Jew did it. No one knows which Jew, of course. Or why. But the pattern's already set. The merchant's widow swears she saw a shadow near the shop that night. Someone with a crooked back. Which, somehow, means someone with a crooked soul. You try to stay inside. Most of the quarter does. Doors stay shut. Candles remain unlit. Even the bread oven's cool, but that doesn't stop them from coming. Late afternoon, the gate shakes. Not opens, shakes. Fists pounding. Voices shouting. Demanding answers, names, punishment. The guard, a local boy, barely 20, shouts back, trying to calm the mob. But his voice is water on fire. Then a stone flies. Then another. The quarter turns into a drumbeat of thuds, cracks, screams. You huddle your family into the storeroom. Thick walls. No windows. You cover your daughter's ears. Your wife grips your hand so tightly you feel your pulse in her palm. Someone bangs on your door. Then silence. You don't know how long you wait. Maybe an hour. Maybe 2. Time twists in the dark. Eventually, footsteps. A voice. Calm, authoritative. It's the bishop's steward. He orders the mob to disperse. Promises a proper investigation. Warns of excommunication. It works. For now, historians still argue whether local clergy incited or protected Jews during violence. The truth varies. Some priests preached peace. Others lit torches. Today, this one chose calm. Tomorrow. Who knows? The next day, soldiers patrol the quarter. Not to protect you. To watch you. Every movement now feels like testimony. You're summoned, again. So are dozens of others, but this time, something's different. The questions are sharper. The scribe doesn't blink. The magistrate has a list. Names. Ledgers. Accusations. someone must be punished. That's clear, a boy, barely 16, confesses. Under pressure. Says he heard a Jew brag about fire. No name. No date. Just enough to make the ink flow. 3 men are taken, one of them is mayor, he doesn't return. Here's your strange but true tidbit. In Strasbourg, 1349, over 900 Jews were burned in a single day, blamed for poisoning wells during the plague. Later, it turned out no one ever saw it happen. But by then, the ashes were history. You visit mayor's wife. She doesn't cry. Just sits on the floor with a torn headscarf and dry lips. They say he confessed, she says. But I know his handwriting better than they do. You nod. That's all you can do. Your daughter asks if it will happen again. You want to say no, but you say, maybe not soon. Because that's the most hope you can summon, so you do what your people have always done. You clean. You bake. You bury. You survive, you help replace mayor's shelves. Copy his notes from memory. Rebuild his recipes. Pass them to his apprentice. Keep his work alive, even when he isn't. That's the trick, you realize. They can strike at the body. But stories. Stories slip through cracks, so you teach your daughter more letters, you teach her how to hide a scroll in plain sight. How to read between the lines. How to survive by remembering, and how to forget just enough to sleep at night, because even in the quiet after the storm, you still don't sleep easy. You listen for knocks, you count coins in your head, you fold your travel sack one more time, just in case. The streets are silent now. The last candle flickers against the wall, casting soft shadows that stretch and sigh like tired memories. You sit on your stool, back straight but weary, listening to the hush that settles after fear. It's not peace, not really. But it's something close enough to rest your head against. Outside, the gate still stands. Closed, as always. But not shaking. Not tonight. You run your fingers over the pages of a worn prayer book. The parchment is warm from your touch, the ink faded in places where generations have wept or whispered the same verses. The wind stirs the shutters, gently. You don't flinch this time. The air is calm, thick with soot and bread and dust. Familiar smells. Human smells. The kind that tell you, yes, we're still here. You think of Mayor. Of your rabbi. Of Reuven with his brittle voice. You think of your daughter, sleeping in the other room, her fingers stained with ink from letters you taught her to write. You think of all the names they've tried to erase, and all the ways those names keep returning, carried by children who speak them in candlelight. You close your eyes, not to forget, but to drift, because even if safety is a myth, sleep is a necessity, and even if the world outside remains sharp and suspicious, the breath inside your chest is warm, and slow, and yours, so let it out, let it settle. You've made it through another night.